Have you ever wondered why poetry sometimes feels like you're trying to crack some kind of intricate secret code, rather than just, reading a straightforward transmission of facts? You're reading along, and suddenly you're hit with a white bird, a wilting flower, or heavy imagery like an iron anchor. You just know inherently that the author isn't actually talking about birdwatching or maritime equipment, right? So what exactly is the hidden architecture driving this kind of language?
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're popping the hood on poetic mechanics by re-examining two absolutely foundational literary concepts, the sign and the referent. Honestly, these two terms are the ultimate keys to dissecting this literary architecture. They're going to completely transform how you critically read and experience complex texts by revealing the actual gears of semiotics. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with poetry's secret code, move into defining sign and referent, look at how the pieces connect, uncover why poets use signs, and wrap up with how context changes everything. All right, part one, poetry's secret code, going beyond the letters. Look, when you read a technical manual or a financial report, a word usually just means exactly what it says. Its whole utility is in its directness. But in poetry, it's a totally different ballgame. Words there function completely differently. They're actually pointers to much deeper concepts and feelings. To truly grasp complex literary topics, we have to look at how words, symbols, and images create meaning far beyond themselves. They aren't just literal letters on a page. They are essentially signposts guiding us to an unseen emotional destination. They rely on a shared human experience to transmit massive amounts of abstract data in just a handful of syllables. Moving on to part two, defining sign and referent, establishing our academic baseline. Okay, to really understand this magic trick, we've got to revisit the vocabulary. We have to distinctly separate the physical, visible word you read on the page from the invisible concept it triggers in your mind. Let's begin with the visible half. A sign is a word, symbol, image, gesture, or object that stands for or represents something else. In literature and poetry, a sign is that tangible word that points you, the reader, toward a particular object, idea, feeling, or concept. Think of it as the vehicle delivering the message. But importantly, this vehicle only works because of semiotics. It relies entirely on a shared cultural understanding between the author and the reader to function properly. We both have to implicitly agree on what the sign looks like for the vehicle to even move. And that brings us to the destination that vehicle brings us to. The referent is the thing, idea, person, object, or concept that the sign represents. It is the invisible emotional payoff. It's that profound meaning that just pops into your mind the moment you encounter that sign. So the sign is what we see, the referent is what we feel and understand. For example, if the sign is a solid red octagon on the side of the road, the referent is the immediate, deeply ingrained command to stop your car. The physical shape isn't the action itself, but it instantly triggers the abstract concept in your brain. Section 3, how the pieces connect, or as I like to call it, the decoder ring. Let's actually put this literary decoder ring together using some source examples. Check out the bridge between what you read and what you feel. We've got our signs, a dove, a rose, a heart, a cross, a chain, a star. These are tangible, physical things. And then we have our reference. Peace, love, affection, faith, oppression, and hope. These are totally abstract concepts. The visible sign communicates a profound, unseen meaning, utilizing that shared cultural encoding to just completely bypass lengthy, boring explanations. Let's walk through a specific line of poetry to see this interplay in action. A white dove flew over the silent field. Now notice the deliberate omission here. The poet totally bypasses the heavy-handedness of the word peace. Instead, they use the visible sign of the dove to suggest the idea to you. It's a really elegant shortcut that trusts your intelligence as a reader to bridge the gap. Let's try another one. The crown rested upon his head. I want you to visualize that visible sign for a second. A heavy, golden crown. Now connect it to its abstract reference. A crown isn't just a fancy hat, right? It's a pointer to power, authority, or leadership. And notice how the physical properties of the sign, heavy, golden, rigid, directly inform the nature of the referent. It suggests the heavy, rigid burden of leadership and the preciousness of authority. The image does all the complex psychological heavy lifting without the poet ever having to lecture you about the burdens of power. Which leads us perfectly into section 4, why poets use signs, looking at the poet's motive. This naturally brings up a question that you, as a focused learner, are probably asking right now. Why go through all this trouble? Why not just write what you mean in plain, direct language?
Well, let's juxtapose a literal sentence with a poetic one to immediately prove the point. Imagine just reading, "There was peace." It's accurate, sure, but wow, it's incredibly dry. It's clinical. Contrast that with, "A white dove crossed the sky." This creates a far more vivid and memorable image for the reader. Which one actually paints a picture in your mind? Which one do you actually feel? Poets intentionally use signs instead of direct statements for three core reasons, and understanding these will fundamentally change how you consume art. First, it makes the work exponentially more meaningful. Instead of flat, disposable statements, signs provide lasting imagery. A complex symbol sticks in the human memory far longer than a sterile fact, largely because our brains are evolutionarily wired to remember spatial and physical details. Second, it's significantly more imaginative. When a poet says peace, they do all the work for you. When they say white dove, it requires active interpretation. It forces your brain to engage, transforming you from a passive consumer into an active participant. And third, it is vastly more emotional. We naturally connect with symbols and images on a visceral level because they tie into shared human mythology and primal archetypes. They evoke a physical reaction that dry data simply cannot achieve. Let's see that emotional power up close. The broken chain fell to the ground. The chain acts as a sign where the referent is oppression, bondage, or systemic restriction. Therefore, the breaking of that chain powerfully refers to freedom. The poet didn't just write, "The oppression ended." They showed you a heavy metal chain, cold, unyielding, restrictive. And then they showed it shattering. They made you feel the visceral, explosive, emotional release of that freedom, rather than just intellectually processing it.
Finally, Section 5. Context changes everything, dealing with the shifting meaning of it all. But there is a catch. The absolute crucial point to remember as you analyze literature is that signs are not static math equations. Their meanings shift entirely based on the poem's context. As experienced readers, you know that if signs were just fixed definitions in a dictionary, we'd have one simple, universally correct answer for every metaphor, and that would be boring. So let me pose this question to you. What does a star mean? Because a single sign can splinter into multiple, wildly different interpretations depending entirely on the text that surrounds it. Think about the possible reference for a star. If the poem is about a lost traveler, the star's referent is likely guidance. If it's about someone facing total despair, it might mean hope. If it's about ambition, the referent could be dreams or achievement. This introduces the most fascinating dynamic between authorial intent and reader interpretation. The poet sets the parameters of the environment, but you, the reader, must examine the surrounding ecosystem of the poem to determine the most appropriate referent. You aren't just passively consuming text. You are actively solving a puzzle and bringing your own lived experience to the interpretation. Let's use an anchor as our final example. The anchor kept the ship steady. The sign is crystal clear, a heavy iron anchor. But what is the referent? Well, depending on what the ship represents in the poem, that anchor could mean stability in a turbulent life, it could mean security in a rocky relationship, or the steadfastness of hope in truly dark times. The poet hands you the sign, but leaves you fully empowered to interpret the art for yourself. Which brings me to a final question to leave you with today. The next time you read a poem, will you just read the superficial signs on the page, or will you use your analytical decoder ring to actively unlock the profound reference hidden beneath? The true depth of the text is right there waiting for you. All you have to do is look beyond the letters and trust your own interpretation. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep exploring.